Kia ora, hello, it's Friday the 3rd of July. I'm Philip Duncan and thanks for joining me as we take a look at your weekend weather and the forecast right across next week. On the satellite imagery today, plenty of cloud moving in from the Tasman. We've got some thunderstorms offshore. High pressure is still pretty much firm around the Chatham Islands and the central and upper part of the North Island. So you'll notice most of the cloud is building in the southern part of New Zealand, the southern half of the South Island and along the west coast. And then some cloud now moving in to western parts of the North Island, including the far north, as that high pressure belt slowly starts to move away to the east. So this evening, here is the air pressure map with the wind on top of it. So high pressure, the main centre parked here just east of the Chatham Islands, a secondary centre still over the North Island. And that secondary centre means light winds, even though we can see these northerly quarter winds, northeasterlies, northwesterlies, northerlies are all in the mix around New Zealand, but the lightest winds will be around central and upper parts of the North Island, but it may not be overly windy through inland parts, sheltered areas of the South Island as well. But you can see the Cook Strait nor'wester and the winds building around Fiordland as lower pressure moves through. So most of the low pressure is off the screen, but a new area of low pressure will form in the Tasman. That's the one that will move up to the North Island as we go into next week, and makes for a pretty messy and complicated weather forecast. I will do my best to break it down for you. Let's kick off now with the 8-day rainfall map. So here is the situation as we go into this afternoon. A couple of showers maybe coming through as we go into the western side of the lower North Island. 1 or 2 showers up here in the northeast, but most of the rain around Fiordland and southwestland. Maybe a couple of showers could come in around the Tasman area as well. So let's animate this for the next 8 days. Thanks to NEDAP for supporting us. You can see most of that heavy rain on the west coast. Then the low forms in the north. That pushes in rain around the North Island, but then starts to grow it into the South Island. So we're going to see some big rainfall totals, but this could still move. I've been saying this all week because it has been moving around. Heaviest rain north of about Kaikoura up towards Marlborough. Some areas in here are showing 200 to 300 millimetres of rain in just the next several days. That's a lot of rain. That could move a little further south, more into Canterbury, where some areas here could be getting over 100 millimetres. And also around the lower North Island, which obviously just had the flooding recently. Better news at the moment, but that's a very close, close to have all this heavy rain in the northeast corner of the South Island, so close to the Wairarapa Upper region and Wellington. So we'll be monitoring that as we go through the weekend, and check your local forecast to look at the rainfall totals. They might move around a bit. And also obviously heavy rain potential around Hawke's Bay, but also up around Gisborne, Tairāwhiti, East Cape, Bay of Plenty, Coromandel Peninsula, the chance of those heavy falls. Obviously the west coast has got a couple of 100 millimetres or more on the way as well. And some of that rain could spill over a bit into the Tasman, Nelson, Marlborough region. So quite a bit of wet weather, but it's very broken up. And the areas that are in between it all, yellow, even some green shading in there, those areas are around the 15, 20, 30, 40 millimetre mark. So not everyone will get heavy rain. There will be some drier areas, potentially around Manawatu and Wanganui and those sorts of areas. But this is still going to change over the coming days. So here is noon Saturday. Let's make sense of what is happening. The cold stuff waiting off here in the western side of the country around Fiordland and coming in towards Southland as we go into the later part of Saturday. Heavy rain for southwestland. Watch out for the rain warnings. There might be wind warnings here with the northwesterlies picking up, becoming stronger, and that goes up to about Wellington, southern Wairarapa. Most of the North Island is dry between today and tomorrow into the lunchtime period for the North Island, but you can see those showers I was talking about, a few of those, and that northeasterly wind and the northerly winds and the northwesterly winds will gradually lift the temperatures up. So overnight lows are going up nationwide as we go into Friday night tonight and then tomorrow night as well. Here is Sunday's forecast. So we've got low pressure around the South Island, small bit of low pressure around the upper North Island. The coldest of the weather is out in the Tasman Sea and moving into the South Island. So the polar boundary goes right up to Nelson and Marlborough. Snow flurries are expected to lower down. Take a look at the Met Service mountain forecast if you want more details on that. But it could go down to a couple of 100 metres in some areas, and you never know. It can go lower than that with certain showers. You get a downdraft that blows it down beyond that level that is forecast. So it can be very tricky with our mountains and ranges. all the relatively warm ocean around us can make it a little hard to work out exactly where the snow will be, but certainly in the mountains and the alpine passes and the ski fields, we do expect some snow in the South Island. In the North Island, northerly winds turning northwesterly. But keep in mind, this big cold southerly change out at sea is going to get caught up in this newly developing low pressure zone. So once we get to Monday, look at the polar boundary, it's all over the place. But generally speaking, it's coming into the South Island, up the Tasman Sea or northwards through the Tasman Sea area, and curves around, gets a bit broken up around the upper North Island, but it's still there in the forecast. So not very often that places like Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula and Waikato have a cold northerly, but that is likely as we go into the start of next week. Some places might only be 13 or 14 degrees with a northerly in the upper North Island. That's not very often that happens. So the cold airflow being mixed in here with this low pressure zone, the rain moving through into eastern parts of Bay of Plenty, East Cape, towards Hawke's Bay, and the cold southeasterly pushing into Otago, Southland, and up towards Marlborough. And that's where you'll get a mixture of rain showers and snow flurries down to a couple of hundred metres. That 200 metre mark could change. Some modelling says 300 metres, others have put it down to 100. So, it's variable because it is not just one big southerly coming up across the country. It's all being mixed up, and that low is dragging down milder airflows and injecting that into the South Island. And that's why we're going to see the rain lifting up in these eastern areas, which we do here on Tuesday. So like I say, this has moved around a bit. It showed Bay of Plenty the other day, then it moved to Hawke's Bay, then Waited Upper, then South Canterbury, then it shifted it northwards, and now it's mostly north of Kaikoura up towards Marlborough. So that area there is worth monitoring with some heavy rain potential coming through. That is just the snapshot at lunchtime. It's not a 24-hour rainfall map. So you're still seeing, some heavy rain, 30, 40 millimetres coming through in just a few hours is possible around northern, but especially this northeastern side of the South Island. And of course, with the cold airflow just nearby, that will turn to snow, especially along the mountains and ranges. And there could be some snow flurries around parts of South Canterbury above a couple of hundred metres or maybe a little bit higher than that. We'll just have to wait and see. So the ski fields will get some snow, but it is dry here, down around Queenstown for the most part. Temperatures will be down, certainly next week though, across the South Island. They'll be wintry. So here we are on Wednesday, cold easterly winds blowing through. Still some heavy rain potential in northern Canterbury, eastern parts of Marlborough, and including now maybe Waited Upper, southern parts of Waited Upper, caught up in what is coming out of the subtropics and being fed in. So then the further down the South Island you go, where it mixes with the polar boundary, that's where you're more likely to see those snow levels lowering out. But again, we're not seeing a lot of wet weather, which means snowfall may be minimal. In New Zealand, it doesn't take a lot of snow to close a road though, so just be aware of that as we go through with the holidays, people travelling. But there are some large dry areas, and if you're along the western side of New Zealand, it is looking very dry in many places as we go through next week. By Thursday, the low is now well out to the northeast of the North Island, directly north of the Chatham Islands. So easterly winds and showers for the Chathams, and that airflow, that southeasterly, comes into Waited Upper, especially Hawke's Bay, northern Hawke's Bay, and up towards East Cape. You've got those cold south to southeasterly winds. They'll be even colder from Wellington southwards, but not as strong. So we've still got the easterly flow coming through, not producing much in the way of wet weather or snow, but there's more low pressure building out in the Tasman Sea, and the southeasterly wind usually makes it very sunny around Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Auckland, and large parts of Northland. Around Manawatu, you're on the edge of those showers that are on the eastern side, so some of those might just spill over a wee bit to the west. Does look mostly dry though, with maybe some cloud around, and it won't be a warm day. And then we get to Friday of next week, our final map, the main low out here northeast of the Chatham Islands, but as it moves away, this little bubble of high pressure builds here southeast of Dunedin, and so it pushes the colder wind into the lower part of the North Island. The polar boundary actually goes northwards, and then there's more low pressure coming out of the Tasman Sea. But many places are dry. There are still showers along the eastern side of the country in particular. There might be a few showers on the west coast of the South Island, but the low obviously here is the main feature for the next several days. So we've got a bit of a messy forecast. Keep an eye on the Met Service warnings and watches. Keep an eye on the mountain forecast to work out snow and all that sort of stuff. And your local rainfall at weatherwatch or ruralweather.co.nz. Those numbers might move around a bit over the weekend when we're not doing our video updates. So keep up to date with that. And the Met Service warnings and watches should have you covered. Have a great weekend. See you again on Monday.